I've always felt safe in nature. Camping was my way of escaping the noise of the city. A chance to breathe air that didn't taste like car exhaust, to hear crickets instead of traffic. That night, my friend and I drove to a remote spot near a quiet lake, far from organized campgrounds. We had read online that hardly anyone went there anymore, which made it sound perfect to us. We arrived just before the sun dipped behind the trees. The sky turned deep orange as we pitched our tent on a patch of soft grass close to the water. We built a small fire and cooked a quick meal. The sound of the fire crackling and the calm rippling of the lake made the whole place feel almost unreal. For hours, we sat there talking, laughing, feeling like the world outside didn't exist. There wasn't another soul around, or at least that's what we believed. By midnight, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. The woods had gone dead silent, the kind of silence where you suddenly notice your own heartbeat. We crawled into the tent, zipped it shut, and stretched out in our sleeping bags. The air smelled faintly of smoke, and the ground felt cool beneath us. I drifted off quickly. I don't know how long I slept before waking to the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy crunches on dry leaves. At first I thought it might be a deer, but the rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. These weren't the uneven steps of an animal. They were human. I froze, ears straining. The footsteps circled the tent once, then again. My friend shifted in his sleeping bag. In a low whisper, he asked, "Do you hear that?" "Yes," I whispered back, my throat tight. The steps stopped. A stick snapped in the silence. Someone was standing just a foot away from where I lay. My chest tightened. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. Then came a soft noise, fabric stretching. The zipper of the tent twitched, like a finger had pressed against it. Before I had time to think, I thrust my hand outward. My palm smacked against something solid, a leg. Whoever it was jerked back, and I heard quick footsteps retreating into the darkness. I gasped for air, my friend grabbing my arm. "Don't go out," he whispered. "What if he's waiting?" For minutes we lay there, holding still, staring at the thin fabric walls of the tent. Just when I felt my breathing slow, the footsteps returned. Louder this time. Faster. The person was running circles around the tent, the sound of boots hitting leaves in quick succession. Then silence. Suddenly, the wall of the tent yanked inward. The whole structure shook as if someone had grabbed it with both hands and pulled. My friend scrambled for his flashlight and clicked it on, pressing it against the thin nylon. The beam lit up the outline of a figure. Broad shoulders, a head tilted slightly, no more than inches away from us. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I ripped the zipper open and threw myself outside. A man stood there. His clothes were torn, stained with dirt. His face was blank, his eyes locked on me. He didn't say a word. He lunged. He hit me square in the chest and drove me into the ground. The breath was knocked out of me as he pinned my shoulder down with one arm. His other hand reached for something at his side. I twisted, shoving him, clawing at his sleeve, trying to break free. My friend burst out of the tent, shouting as loud as he could. "Get off him!" he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. The man froze for a second, then pushed harder against me. His grip was rough, his breath sour and hot against my face. I managed to knee him in the ribs, and he stumbled just enough for me to scramble back onto my feet. That's when I saw it. He was holding a long piece of metal, maybe a crowbar. He lifted it halfway, his knuckles white as he gripped it. "Back up!" my friend screamed, grabbing a heavy stick from the fire pit. The tip still glowed orange. He swung it through the air, sending sparks flying. For a tense moment, none of us moved. The man's chest heaved, his eyes wild in the flickering light. I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Then, slowly, he lowered the crowbar. He stared at us for what felt like forever before stepping back. One step, then another. He didn't run. He just melted into the trees, his outline swallowed by the darkness. We stood frozen, still gripping our makeshift weapons, listening to the sound of leaves crunching as he faded away. My friend's hand trembled so badly he almost dropped the stick. "We need to go," I whispered. We packed everything in silence, our hands clumsy, fumbling with the tent poles, barely daring to speak above a whisper. Every rustle in the woods made us whip our heads around. At one point, I thought I saw movement in the trees and nearly bolted. Finally, we threw our gear into the car and started the engine. As the headlights swept across the campsite, I saw it. Footprints. Deep impressions circling our tent, over and over, like someone had been pacing there for hours. My stomach dropped. We didn't wait another second. Tires kicked up dirt as we sped down the rough trail, away from the lake, away from that silence that suddenly felt suffocating. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted. Maybe he was living out there, watching campers for reasons I don't want to imagine. Maybe he wanted to scare us, or worse. All I know is that I never again set foot in a tent without hearing those footsteps in my head. The footsteps that circled us in the dark. The ones that stopped right outside, beside my head, in the middle of the night. Camping was meant to be quiet, predictable, even boring. That night started exactly like that. We had chosen a spot tucked between tall pines, not far from a small stream. The fire we built gave off enough warmth to keep the air from biting, and the glow pushed the darkness back just far enough to make us feel safe. By midnight, we were tired enough to crawl into the tent, leaving the last of the flames flickering in the pit. The sounds of the forest, bugs, branches shifting in the breeze, lulled me toward sleep. I woke later to something else, a sound I couldn't place right away. Not footsteps, not an animal. It was softer, like fabric moving. I sat up, trying to listen, and then I realized what it was. The faint creak of the folding chair by the fire. My stomach tightened. That chair was empty when we went to sleep. Careful not to make noise, I unzipped the tent just enough to look outside. The fire was almost gone, just embers glowing. In the weak light, I saw a shape. Someone was sitting in the chair. A man. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, perfectly still, staring at the dying fire like it belonged to him. I froze in place, trying to process what I was looking at. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, like he had been there for hours. His head tilted slightly as if listening to something. Then, slowly, he turned. Not all the way, just enough that I knew he had noticed me watching. I zipped the tent back up, hands trembling. My friend stirred, whispering groggily, but I pressed a hand over his mouth before he could say a word. I leaned close and whispered, "Someone's here." We sat in silence, ears straining. The chair creaked again. Then came the sound of movement. His steps crunched lightly in the dirt. He wasn't sneaking. He was letting us hear. The tent suddenly felt like nothing but thin paper between us and him. Then, to my shock, a voice broke the silence. "You left your fire unattended," he said, calm, almost conversational. The words came from just outside, less than a few feet away. Neither of us answered. The voice had a flatness to it, like he was stating something obvious, not expecting a reply. "This place isn't safe at night." The zipper twitched, pulled down an inch before stopping. My friend grabbed his pocket knife, hand shaking. I held my breath, waiting, but the zipper didn't move further. Instead, the man spoke again, softer this time. "I saw you earlier, by the stream." The silence stretched until I thought he had left. Then the sound of rummaging came from outside. Bags shifting, metal clinking. He was going through our gear. My friend whispered, barely audible, "We have to stop him." I shook my head. The thought of stepping outside felt impossible. But then came a sound that made my blood surge. Our cooler opening, cans shifting inside. He wasn't just watching anymore, he was helping himself. Summoning whatever nerve I had left, I ripped the zipper down and burst out. The man was crouched near the fire pit, a can of food in one hand. He looked up, unfazed, like he had been waiting for me. I demanded to know what he was doing, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound firm. He stood slowly, the can dropping from his hand into the dirt. He was taller than I expected, his clothes worn, face shadowed except for the pale glint of his eyes reflecting the embers. "You shouldn't be here," he said. My friend came out behind me, gripping the knife. The man's gaze lingered on the blade for a moment, then back to us. His lips curled slightly, not quite a smile, more like recognition. Without warning, he stepped closer, closing the space between us. His hand brushed my shoulder, not striking, just testing. I shoved him back instinctively, and he stumbled one step before regaining balance. For the first time, his expression shifted. Something sharp flickered in his eyes. A hint of anger breaking through the calm. The air felt heavy, the fire nothing but a dull glow. We stood locked in a silent standoff. My friend raised the knife higher, voice low but steady. "Leave." The man tilted his head again, studying us like we were specimens. Then, just as slowly as he had appeared, he turned and walked toward the tree line. No rush, no panic. At the edge of the clearing, he stopped, glanced back once, and then vanished into the woods. We didn't move for several minutes. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick up the scattered gear. Every shadow beyond the trees looked like him returning. Finally, we shoved everything into the car, leaving the tent half collapsed on the ground. As we pulled away, headlights swept across the campsite one last time. The chair by the fire was empty again, rocking slightly, as if someone had just stood up. I never learned who he was or how long he had been there. Maybe a drifter living in the woods, maybe someone following us for reasons I don't want to imagine. All I know is that the silence of that forest, broken by his calm voice, will never leave me. Because it wasn't the food he touched or the fire he warned us about. It was the simple fact that he walked straight into our campsite after midnight and acted like he belonged there. Camping was supposed to be a break from everything. No noise from traffic, no phones buzzing, no voices of neighbors through the walls. Just trees, wind, water, and fire. That night, we drove deep into the woods, far away from any marked campground, down a dirt trail that looked like no one had used it in years. By the time we found a clearing near the lake, the sun was slipping behind the horizon. The forest swallowed the light quickly, and we rushed to pitch the tent before darkness fully set in. By the time the stars came out, a fire burned steady in front of us. The orange glow flickered against the trees, turning them into a wall of shadows. The air smelled of smoke and pine, and for a while, everything felt calm. We cooked, ate, and sat by the flames, trading stories and laughing at small things. For hours, it felt safe, normal. The fire popping, the crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, nature's background music that reminded us we weren't truly alone. Then it all stopped. The crickets went silent first. Then the owl. Even the wind died down, leaving the fire as the only sound in the clearing. At first I thought I was imagining it, but the quiet pressed down so heavy it was impossible to ignore. I felt my skin prickle. I leaned forward, eyes on the tree line, when I saw them. Two faint glimmers just beyond the firelight, like beads of glass catching the flames. They weren't low like an animal, not high like a bird. They were level with my eyes, human. I whispered for my friend to look. His head turned, and the firelight caught the shock on his face. For a moment, the glimmers revealed more than eyes. A figure stood upright, motionless, staring straight at us. My throat tightened, and I barely dared to breathe. Seconds dragged on. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the air, but the figure didn't move. Then, with no sound at all, it shifted and disappeared into the dark. The space it left behind looked darker than the rest of the forest. A stick snapped behind us, and we spun. Nothing there. Then the glimmers returned, closer this time, no more than 20 feet away, right at the edge of the fire's glow. Whoever it was, they weren't hiding. They wanted us to see. My friend shouted into the trees, voice trembling. The words echoed, but no answer came back. Just silence and the faint, deliberate crack of a twig. That silence was worse than any reply. The figure stood there, patient, waiting. Then, in a blink, it vanished again, only to reappear on the opposite side of the clearing. He had crossed without a sound. Half the distance was gone. I snatched the flashlight and pointed it at him. For 1 second, the beam caught his face. Pale, thin, clothes ragged, eyes wide and glassy. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. Then he stepped back, retreating into the trees until the beam caught nothing but bark. We pressed closer to the fire. My hands trembled so badly I had to grip my knees just to keep still. Minutes stretched like hours, my ears straining at every sound. Then I heard it. Footsteps, crunching through the leaves behind the tent. They circled, each step drawn out, as though whoever it was wanted us to hear every one. Then the footsteps stopped. I felt sweat dripping down my back despite the cold. My chest was tight, breath shallow, as if the air itself had thickened. Every nerve in my body screamed to run. Whispering frantically, we decided to leave before the fire died completely. Our hands shook as we stuffed sleeping bags and food into packs. Twice I dropped the flashlight, the beam bouncing wildly across the ground, making the shadows jump and stretch. Every rustle from the trees felt like someone leaning closer. The thought that eyes were fixed on us didn't leave my mind for a second. We hauled everything to the car in silence. My throat felt dry as I reached for the door, but something made me turn my head one last time. The fire was almost gone, glowing embers painting the clearing in dull red. At the edge, half hidden behind a tree, the figure stood again, still. I grabbed the door handle, but froze. Behind him, deeper in the tree line, another shadow was visible. Taller, broader, unmoving. It wasn't just one. The roar of the engine shattered the silence. I dove inside, slammed the door, locked it. The tires spun in the dirt before catching. Headlights swept across the clearing one final time. And in that brief flash, I saw him step forward. His pale face reflected the light, his eyes locked on us. Then the forest swallowed everything, and we were gone. To this day, I don't know who, or how many, were out there, or what they wanted. Maybe people living in those woods, maybe someone waiting for us to fall asleep. Maybe just someone who enjoyed watching fear consume strangers in the dark. I only know I'll never forget that silence, the crickets cutting out in unison, the glimmer of eyes beyond the firelight, and the way not a single word was spoken. Because sometimes the worst terror isn't what someone does. It's knowing they're out there, watching, waiting, and never leaving the shadows.